Hello, my beautiful soul. It's Miss K here, and I welcome you all to my podcast. If you're new here today, I welcome you with a big, warm virtual hug. And if you've already listened to me before, I am so grateful and delighted that you're back. My voice might sound a little bit more deeper today because I'm suffering from common cold, but that wouldn't stop me from recording my podcast. Today's episode, it's very interesting and very deep because I have lost some of my very good friends, particularly male friends, over this topic. I always wanted to have a very good and matured, healthy debate, but magically it would always convert into a very heated argument at last. So, as always, I'm not going to sugarcoat things and I'm going to be blunt from the start. It's about feminism. If you think feminism is over or that women today don't need it, you are either looking at the surface of things or living inside a comfort bubble that seals you from the mess underneath. This episode isn't a polite suggestion, it is dismantling. We are going to look at the ways modern systems like medicine, research, safety standards, law, culture, all are structured around the male default. We are going to call out how that choice costs women pain, illness, dignity, and life. I'm going to show you hard research, uncomfortable facts, and stories that are ugly to hear because sugarcoating won't change anything. By the end of this, if you still say we don't need feminism, I want you to at least know you're speaking from privilege. And I want you to feel the weight of what that means. This is not theoretical, it is politically and medically material. It is about who we prioritize when we design the world. And the answer is painfully clear. Most systems were designed to prioritize men. Alright, let's talk briefly about the history of feminism. Feminism has waves for a reason. It's a long, messy fight where progress is partial and incomplete. The early thinkers, people like Mary Wollstonecraft, argued for rational equality and education for women. Later waves fought for voting rights, labor protections, and reproductive rights. But here's the crucial history point. Until very recent, the movement itself sometimes centered certain women, usually white and middle class women, while sidelining women of color, disabled women, working class women, and queer women. That blind spot matters because when the victory is written into law or practice based on one group's needs, it does not automatically translate into justice for all. Today's feminism must be intersectional, which means looking at race, class, geography, disability, sexuality, because oppression compounds. That's not a side argument, it's the core reason why saying feminism is over is naive. Progress for some is not progress for all. The first thing that I would like to talk about is the medical misogyny that underpins so much real harm. For decades, medical research used men, male animals in lab work, male subjects in early phase drug trials, male based anatomical models as the default. The official excuse? Female biology is more complicated, with hormones and menstrual cycles that make study harder. Let's call that what it is, an excuse to avoid extra work and blatant misogyny. The consequence has been catastrophic. If you design treatments, emergency protocols, dosages, surgical techniques, mannequins, even safety equipment around one body that is male, then women get second rated care. This isn't subtle, it is structural. There are documented policy attempts to force change, and yet the gap remains. International reviews show that sex and gender are still inadequately considered in research design and reporting. Policy changes have been slow to translate into practice. When researchers say women's physiology is complex, that's not a reason to exclude them. it's more of a reason to study them properly and deeply. A recent literature review commissioned by a National Health Department argues exactly that. Sex and gender bias persists in medical systems and needs targeted strategies to correct it. Alright, so it's time to get more deeper, so let me give you specifics that should genuinely make people angry. First, crash test dummies. For decades, the dummies used in car safety tests represented the average male, not women, not sort of people, not pregnant bodies. As a result, safety systems, for example, the seat design, airbag deployment, seatbelt fit, were optimized for a male frame. The data show women are significantly more likely to be injured or killed in crashes, partially because the testing didn't reflect female anatomy. That's not an accident, that's design bias. New female dummies exist, and researchers and advocates are forcing regulators to catch up, but progress is uneven and still not implemented. Secondly, let's talk about CPR mannequins. If you learn life saving chest compressions on a flat chested mannequin, you might hesitate or compress incorrectly on a female chest. A 2023 global review of CPR mannequins found almost no mainstream models that represent female anatomy with breast. Training on these models reduces bystander CPR for women and can cost literal lives. That's an abstract, fixable gap. Yet still no mainstream progress has been done. Thirdly, I want to talk about drug trials and dosing. Historically, early phase clinical trials often excluded women, and when women were included, data weren't always analyzed separately by sex. That's why, over time, we discovered that many drugs produce different effects, side effects, or optimal doses in women, sometimes with deadly consequences. Policy fixtures like NIH requirements to include sex as a biological variable have helped, but a huge amount of practice remains male centric. Recent systematic work still shows sex and gender are underrepresented in trial design, analysis, and reporting. That's not a technical footnote. It means symptom presentation is misread, conditions are misdiagnosed, and treatments are not optimized for half of the population. Now let's talk about something that is so obvious, yet it is always sidelined because it is labeled as women's problem, and that is periods. I'm going to be bluntly honest with you all over here. If men experienced monthly bleeding and excruciating cramps, there would be a global industry of radical investment, insurance coverage, and state level policy to address it. But periods happen to women, the response has been neglected, stigmatized, and commodified. Period pain is normalized to the point where people say, it's just period, and expect women to perform at work in school regardless of crippling pain. Meanwhile, menstrual products are taxed as luxury items in many places, and women are forced to buy basic hygiene. We accept all of this as normal. That normalization is misogyny by policy and culture. Endometriosis is a stark example. It affects an estimated 10% of people with uteruses, causing severe pain, infertility, and life disruption. And yet, diagnosis delays are common, sometimes taking years. Even research priorities have been screwed. You will find studies that focus on the psychological effects on male partners or on family planning consequences. I mean, look at that. The primary focus on a health diagnosis is centered around the male and the family planning consequences rather than the primary subject that is woman in this matter. Yes, those things matter, but research historically paid insufficient attention to the physical pain and pathology experienced by the women themselves or delayed diagnosis. That's a medical bias, centering the relational or social cost without centering the person with disease. It's telling, it's right up front in your face, and it's very cruel. Now, the next topic is even deeper. And let me tell you, when I was doing research on this specific topic, it genuinely made me fume with anger by knowing the history and depths of it. I'm going to talk about childbirth, the most obvious and the most for grantedly taken thing which costs women life. This is one place where the male centered model is glaring and long standing. Historically, in many societies, women gave birth in upright, squatting, hands and knees positions. Positions that use gravity, widen the pelvic outlet, and can aid progress and reduce trauma. Modern hospital births in many countries moved mothers to supine or lithotomy positions, lying on their backs, because historically it was easier for male doctors to see and intervene. The consequence? A disruption of physiology. There is real evidence that upright labor positions can shorten the second stage of labor and improve outcomes. And yet, medical institutions normalize supine positions because of convenience for clinicians and the demonstrable control it gives care providers. That matters because when we take a process that evolved with the female body and reconfigure it around the provider's comfort, we don't improve women's life, we make them more painful and medicalized. There's also the story of oxytocin. Oxytocin is not a propaganda. It's a hormone intimately tied to uterine contractions, bonding, and the flow of natural labor. The physiology of childbirth includes surges of oxytocin, which help labor process and can naturally modulate pain. When interventions like routine induction, excessive use of epidurals without supportive physiology, or non physiological positioning occur, they can blunt the natural cascade, creating a cycle where more interventions are used to manage the process that was initially made less psychologic. I'm not giving you out these deep informations to confuse you, but rather to notice the fact that even in woman centric processes like childbirth, which is very sensitive in nature, revolves around the comfortness of the system, which was predominantly created by men, where a woman's body and nature both combined is more than sufficient to have the process of childbirth less traumatic and more pleasurable. But of course, why would they leave the single opportunity of capitalizing and self dominating over woman's body as always? This becomes a self fulfilling loop of intervention. The medical system often treats the body of a woman like a machine that must be controlled rather than an ecosystem to be supported. And who benefits? Of course, the convenience, predictability, or liability reduction for providers, rarely the birthing person. This isn't just academic. Women report trauma, lack of consent, and outcomes that reflect this system. Choosing whether to induce, whether to episiotomy, how to position the birthing person, these are political and medical decisions with power dynamics baked in. Now let's move on to the next topic, that is birth control. For decades, women have soldered most contraception options. Those are pills, implants, IUDs, injections, while male options were limited to condoms or vasectomies. The result? Women have to bear the side effects of hormonal contraception for decades, sometimes serious ones, while male contraceptive research has long lagged. Here's one of the clearest, most ironic examples of how patriarchy shapes our logic. If we were to approach this topic purely from a biological and mathematical standpoint, it makes far more sense for a man, not a woman, to be the one using contraceptives. A single man can impregnate hundreds, even thousands of women in a year, while a woman can only carry one pregnancy roughly every 9 months. If population control was genuinely about controlling the number of births, it's basic logic that male contraception would be most effective solution. But of course, logic takes a back seat when patriarchy drives the vehicle. Instead of asking men who are the primary source of potential pregnancies, to take responsibility, society conventionally places the entire burden, physical, hormonal, emotional, on women. Women are the ones who have to pump their bodies with synthetic hormones, deal with mood swings, cramps, acne, nausea, weight changes, and even infertility just to prevent something that biologically men could stop more effectively with a single pill or vasectomy. This isn't just bad science, it's patriarchal conditioning disguised as common sense. For decades, male birth control pills have been in testing phases, conventionally served every time men complained about side effects like fatigue or mood changes, the very side effects women have been enduring for generations without anyone blinking. It's as if the discomfort of a man is unacceptable, but the suffering of a woman is expected. Society normalizes women's pain as a part of their duty, while men's comfort is treated as non negotiable. This is the hypocrisy of patriarchy. It exploits female biology and sacrifices women's well being to maintain male convenience. Birth control isn't just about preventing pregnancy anymore. It's about who carries the burden of responsibility, and in this system, women always does. And that's not nature, that's design. A patriarchal design that keeps women's bodies as the default site of control, regulation, and blame. When male hormonal contraceptive trials showed side effects in volunteers years ago, many headlines highlighted the double standard. Men's trials were halted at the smallest hint of mood or libido changes, while millions of women accept substantial side effects because the system has normalized female contraceptive risks. That double standard is not just science, it's gendered risk tolerance. Recently, there are promising non hormonal male contraceptive implants and other methods under trial. Those advances should have come earlier, but structural inertia and gendered expectations meant women carried the burden for too long. If societies truly valued equity, contraceptive innovation would have been distributed across sexes much earlier. Now let's decode fertility myths. We need nuance here because the narrative that woman's egg spoils at 25 has been weaponized to rush women into early marriage or parenthood. Biologically, female reproductive potential does decline with age. Quantity and quality of oocytes decrease and risks rise in later decades. That's supported by reproductive medicine and major bodies like ACOZ, but the cultural simplification, if you don't have a baby by X, you're done, is ideological pressure, not helpful biology. Meanwhile, paternal age matters too. Increasing evidence shows sperm quality, DNA fragmentation, and paternal age associated risks do change with age and have implications for offspring health. The honest biological picture is complex. Both parents matter, and fertility is not a single clock narrative used to coerce women. We should use the science to inform choices, not politicize them. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me present you the global brutal facts, the violence, the bans, the systemic cruelty surrounding women. And I can already hear you saying, that's too much for us, just stop, Cree. No. Sorry, I'm not gonna stop. Until and unless there are people who still say we don't need feminism, despite clearly seeing the system of injustice that is uprooted by patriarchy and misogyny. This is the part I don't want to soften. Globally, violence against women is pervasive. The WHO estimates that about 1 in 3 women experience physical or sexual violence in their lifetime. That's not a statistics you can ignore. That's hundreds of millions of human beings, and honestly speaking, including me. Most of the women hesitate you to share nuances of them being a sexual or any kind of violence victims solely because of how they would be perceived by the society and their people. Across countries and cultures, women are threatened by intimate partner violence, sexual violence by strangers, childhood abuse, trafficking, forced marriage, honor killings, and structural neglect. UN database estimate hundreds of millions of women have been subjected to violence. This is systemic, worldwide, and persistent. Look at Afghanistan as a living example of how rapidly and completely women's rights can be erased. The Taliban's return to power led to bans on girls' secondary education, restrictions on women's mobility, and removal of many public roles for women. UNESCO and UN agencies report millions of girls banned from school, a generational catastrophe for women's autonomy and health. This isn't hypothetical. It is happening right now and demonstrates how fragile rights can be. Across many countries, you will find horrific punishments against women for morality offenses, dowry murders, acid attacks, and femicide. The UN and multiple agencies publish data showing gender related killings and the scale of femicide. These are not isolated crimes. They are symptoms of cultures and systems that allow misogyny to escalate into murder. Let's talk some history now. Let's talk about some examples where women were sidelined from their own work, where they were discredited or undercredited. Let's take the example of Rosalind Franklin. Her X-ray diffraction images were crucial for the discovery of DNA's double helix. Yet, when Watson and Crick received the Nobel Prize, Franklin's work was omitted and her contribution was under-acknowledged for decades. This is an emblematic example of how women's labor is just completely written out of history. There is also the case of Mileva Maric, Einstein's first wife, that is debated among historians for ages. Some sources argue she collaborated closely with Einstein early on, while others say her role has been overstated. The important point isn't about proving if someone else's work is true or not. It's the pattern. Women in partnership or as junior colleagues often had their intellectual labor minimized or credited to men. These pattern repeats across fields. These are not just wrong credits, they are cultural debts that have long-term effects on who gets funding, prices, visibility, and role models. Patriarchy does not always scream. Most of the time, it whispers through the most ordinary moments of our lives. It's in the family gatherings where women spend their entire day cooking, cleaning, serving, and smiling, only to sit down last, often eating whatever's left, regardless of their exhaustion. It's in the casual silence of men when their friends make sexist jokes because it's just banter. It's in the way a man's worth rises with his body count, but a woman's reputation falls with hers. It's in workplaces where assertive women are called difficult, while passive men are called composed. It's in festivals where daughters are told to help in the kitchen while sons are told to rest because they are guests. It's in how women apologize for taking up space, for saying no, for wanting more. It's in how men don't even realize that the comfort they enjoy often comes at the quiet labor, suppression, and self destruction of the women around them. And even now, when women work, earn, and contribute equally, sometimes even more, they still carry the invisible weight of domestic labor. They are expected to manage the home, raise the children, maintain the relationships, and somehow stay graceful through it all. What was supposed to be a step toward equality has been twisted into a double burden, a reverse dumping disguised as progress. Women didn't gain balance, they gained burnout. Equality wasn't meant to mean that women should do it all. It was meant to mean that everyone should share it all. Yet here we are, applauding ourselves for being modern while still expecting women to juggle careers, households, and emotional labor as if it's their natural duty. These are not isolated incidents. They are the everyday socially accepted faces of patriarchy, subtle, systematic, and exhausting that you can literally see at your own home. I had many of my friends and colleagues ask me, "What kind of feminist do you identify as?" And my answer will always be the same: radical feminist. Here's why I identify as radical feminist. Liberal feminism asks for policy fixes: equal pays, laws, anti discrimination status, representation. Those are necessary, but they have not shifted the architecture underneath. Radical feminism interrogates the system foundations. Who benefits from how power is structured? Why is so much medical research male centered? Why is violence regulated instead of prevented? Radical feminism demands structural transformation in education, in research funding, logic, in how we design public goods and labor markets. It's not about exclusion, it is about reordering systems so that dignity is not conditional. When polite requests and incremental fixes fail to stop femicide, forced banishment of girls from schools, mass sexual violence, or the daily sexualization of women's bodies, that's when root level change becomes a necessity. You know what? Let's visualize what a transformed world would look like. Imagine this: crash testing that uses accurate female dummies as standard, CPR training that normalizes body diversity so no one hesitates to help, drug trials designed to study sex differences so medicine is safe for all, childbirth care that privileges physiology over providers' comfort, and social system that punishes misogyny, addresses structural poverty, and protect girls' right to education instead of using religion as an excuse to deny basic rights. Imagine research funding rebalanced to treat women's pain as worthy of serious investment rather than a cultural cost to be managed. Imagine men and women sharing reproductive responsibility through better male contraception options and social norms that don't force women to carry the entire childbearing burden for the societal stability. That's the aim. That's not naive, it's urgent. I don't expect everyone to be radicalized by this episode, but I do expect honesty. If you hear these facts and walk away thinking, "Oh my god, that's too extreme," ask yourself, what would it take for you to recognize that systems built on male default will never deliver true justice for women? If you are comfortable, ask where that comfort came from. Because unless we move beyond politeness and towards systemic redesign, we will keep reproducing harm in medicine, in public safety, in legal systems, and in culture. Feminism is not anger, it's a demand for basic human dignity. And until women's lives stop being the cost of someone else's convenience, feminism will not be optional. And the truth is, I haven't even touched the tip of the iceberg. Everything I've shared so far, these statistics, these research findings, these everyday examples, are just the surface. I haven't even gone into the deeply rooted systems of patriarchy that are upheld by political structures, legal loopholes, and institutionalized misogyny that continue to shape the world we live in. I haven't touched the laws that still controls women's bodies, the global policies that silence their pain, or the normalized violence that's been made invisible through culture and conditioning. What I have shared today is only a brief glimpse into the latent misogyny and patriarchy that quietly governs our everyday lives. The kind we've been conditioned not to notice, the kind we excuse by saying we already have equality, but we don't. And until we start seeing the invisible, questioning the normalized, and unlearning the comfort of privilege, we'll keep mistaking survival for equality. I know it was a very heavy episode, but these truths needed to be unfolded and to be told so that you would question the everyday norms that seemed normal but cost someone else's life and sacrifices. In case no one told you this today, I am so proud of you. And just keep on learning. Be the uncased mind you already are. I'll see you all next week with some great topics covered. Until then, take care and I love you.